Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this video, we're going to be reviewing the Fate of the Furious movie. Can I just say I don't like that title very much? Here's the thing about Fast and Furious movies. It's a very particular type of movie. They do have generally large budgets and generally pretty good production quality, but they are not generally good movies, if that makes any sense. And I'll be the first person to admit I enjoy watching them a whole bunch. I really like the earlier ones, and these more recent ones I've still enjoyed a whole lot. So you don't have to necessarily call it a good movie to say you like it. So let's keep that in mind, and let's also keep in mind that these movies require a certain suspension of brain power, let's say. Let's just turn off our brains, and then that's how you have to go into it to watch one of these movies and enjoy them. So all of that stuff is kind of just gonna float there as we talk about this movie specifically. It's worth noting that the franchise has changed quite a lot, and that's why I like the earlier movies more than the more recent ones. It used to be this kind of campy Point Break type of thing where we're talking about street racing, and then there's this cops and robbers type of thing going on also, and it's, you know, it's cheesy, but it was still kind of a heavy focus on the cars at least, and it was very specific in targeting an audience, and I think that's why they've kind of expanded as they've grown to broaden their audience, and that's why they're setting records with their box office worldwide openings and things like that. But they've become less about the story and less about the cars and more about the big dumb action, and I think that's probably the biggest problem with this franchise. They took what was already kind of an odd combination, and they got rid of all the heart and just made it all about explosions, basically. Even the people that do like the franchise, it probably irritates them at least a little bit that is the case. And the people that don't like the franchise, well, that's just more material for them to make fun of. So it is an issue. Whether you like it or not, that's up to you. I don't prefer it, but I go into the movie knowing that that's going to be the case. And so the movie is what it is. So does this one do a good job of that? That's the question. Let's talk about the plot first, okay? So the plot for this movie is kind of convoluted and kind of super basic at the same time, but we're just going to run through it super quickly. And I want to point out I'm not going to do any spoilers at all in this video, not even at the end, because there's nothing that's really spoiler worthy that's worth talking about in the review, so don't worry about spoilers. So the plot is that Dom, who's been focused on family and working as this crew, is now turning evil. That's what the trailers make it look like, and we find out he's doing it because of Charlize Theron's character. She's a super hacker, and she has some reason for Dom to go bad, to go against his team, and that gives the team something to do for the entire movie. That's the whole plot. Not exactly not the most thought-provoking, but it's enough to make an action movie work, and that's fine. So no big deal there. It's a little cheesy, but it'll do. And it actually works in many cases once you find out why he's doing what he's doing and what she's done and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of nice tie-ins. It's not necessarily the best in the world, but it'll be enough to drive the action, no pun intended. So let's talk about the writing. The writing for this movie, I don't know. Because they're going away from the more basic type of movie, there's a lot more stuff to talk about. We didn't have tons and tons of stunts in the earlier movies. It was a fairly basic plot with a cool focus on cars and some interesting characters. Now, there are cars and there are the same characters, but the rest of it is all just set piece after set piece, action after action, and because of that, the writing suffers. A lot of what happens is totally, absolutely ridiculous and unbelievable. Now, I did mention you have to turn your brains off to go into one of these movies and expect it to be any good. And that's fine, but to me, there's a certain tipping point where if you just have too much of the same kind of nonsense, it just starts to take away from the movie. And that's starting to happen for the franchise for me. This movie in particular, it's easily the greatest departure from what the franchise was originally. So if you go into this hoping it's like even like 4 and 5, hoping it's even like them, it's not. It's the biggest action-packed, only action-driven movie in the bunch, by far. So a couple of the things, just to give you an example of how it gets a little bit too nonsensical for me, and this isn't really spoiling anything, because it's not plot points, it's just little things that happen. One scenario is Dom's driving a car with an EMP in it, and he has to set off the EMP. and he has to set it off twice. Neither time does it affect his car. I'm not the most knowledgeable on this topic, but I don't think that's possible, and I also don't think it's possible that anything that happens around that EMP is possible. Like, there's a helicopter that doesn't get affected by the EMP. I'm just pretty sure it's not scientifically sound in any way. Another instance, there are a lot of scenes, or one giant scene rather, with a lot of cars driving on ice and handling incredibly well without being treated for it in any way that we're shown anyway. And then even when ice is starting to break, and you guys saw in the trailer, there's a submarine coming up through the ice, and all the ice is breaking in front of it, so it's like a big ramp, and the cars are getting like sucked up onto it, and they're still handling and driving on all these broken pieces of ice. Come on. I mean, that's just a little example of lots of stuff in this movie. There's a whole lot of craziness when it comes to reality and making these cars a realistic thing at all. It was really overboard. No pun intended again. And this happens in TV shows and movies a lot, but in this one there's a big focus on it pretty early on. Cars driving in reverse very fast. That's impossible. They're not made to do that. They can't do that, especially in the way they do it in this movie. It's just unrealistic, and they take all of these unrealistic things, and instead of just having them as part of the action, they're large focal points, and it really does take you out of the action if you have any knowledge of these topics at all. Then the last thing I want to mention is the hacking. We know Charlize Theron's character is a hacker, and she's a super hacker, but come on, you can't hack everything. Absolutely cannot hack everything, especially things that don't have any wireless signal. There are instances, and I'm not going to get into it because that would get spoilery, kind of, but instances with the submarine that she just takes full control of. She's able to hack the submarine and control all of it with no problem, and that is just totally unrealistic. And then there are other instances that's even worse, and there's lots and lots of this stuff that really detracts from the movie. So you really have to turn your brain off for this one. You know that's going to be the problem, though. You know you're going to have that issue with these movies. So are the other bits enough to kind of bolster up the film? So what about the acting? Is the acting any good? And I would argue that overall, it is on par with the other movies. Vin Diesel is Vin Diesel. He does a fine job, no problem at all. Some of the other side characters, like Letty or Tej, or you know the usual crew, they're all fine. They all do their roles, and it's okay. It's nothing special, but it's fine. But then you have new people like Scott Eastwood. He was in the last movie. He's in this one. I don't think he's a very good actor, and he doesn't really deliver his lines nicely. I don't care for him too much in this. But here's the thing. The Rock is now in this movie. I mean, he has been, but now he's definitely a main character, and so is Jason Statham. And I think that's a good thing, because when we lost Paul Walker and Brian is no longer in the movies anymore, they lost a large part of the heart of the movie. I mean, you need those anchor characters, and with him gone, you just have Vin Diesel, really. And he's not as relatable maybe as Paul Walker, so you needed somebody else for the audience to kind of attach to, and I think The Rock and Jason Statham do a really, really good job. I'm a big fan of Dwayne Johnson, and I think these movies show that he does a pretty good job in the action hero type of role. And so I think he and Statham kind of stole the show this time. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Depends what you want. If you just like action movies, then it's fine. But if you wanted a Fast and Furious movie, it does take away, because it's not Fast and Furious. It is another movie in that franchise with other characters and other actors and other goals, and it just doesn't feel like a Fast and Furious movie beyond the crazy car stuff that's not even focusing on the cars anymore. There's a ton of action. Not a lot of it makes any sense, but is it any good? Is the action good in this movie? And I have to say, yes, it is. Despite how many ridiculous and nonsensical things happen, it's still really enjoyable, and a lot of it's done really well. There's just a ton of stuff happening. I would argue that it could get, for some people, to the point where it's just too much. There's not really that many arcs, or I guess instead of having one nice big arc, there's like that. Only it's like all the way up, all the way up, all the way up. Constant action almost all the time. It does become a little bit exhausting, but it didn't really bother me. I enjoy action movies, so it was fine, and most of it was well done beyond the craziness, so I thought it was pretty good. I do think one of the biggest problems for this movie, and it might be the director's fault or the editor's fault, I'm not sure, I noticed a lot of scenes where things were sped up. So cars would be driving in, and instead of them driving fast, you can tell that the footage is sped up. It just looks super cheesy. It reminded me of Blade when he's driving through the city, like that first scene when he's in his car, and it's that super fast camera. And it just looks really, really cheesy. It takes a lot out of it. And they did it in scenes where it didn't matter even. So there's a bunch of military vehicles like in a convoy coming to stop them from doing what they're doing at this military base. That's sped up to make it look like the military vehicles are driving faster than they are. And that happens a lot in this movie, and it does take a lot out of the action. That said, the action's still pretty good, but it's not handled with that much finesse. It's just a whole lot of explosions, a whole lot of way over the top things, which is fun, but I prefer a little bit of finesse in my action also. It's up to you if you like that kind of thing or not. That's going to determine how you feel about it. So the last thing we need to talk about is the CGI. Obviously, not all of these things are happening in real life for the movie. A lot of it looks really good. I mean, obviously they don't have a full-on submarine doing all of the stuff that it's doing with cars on the ice and everything. Now, I know they did some of this stuff, but clearly a lot of it had to be CGI. And then for the rest of the movie too, not just that scene. And most of the CGI looks really good. Most of it you can't tell. The shots of them in their cars as they're driving and stuff, they look pretty good. I mean, obviously we know they're not doing it, but it looks pretty good. It looks believable, so that's fine. But there are some scenes where they clearly added cars in with CGI, or just like the hero thing is CGI. The thing that you're focusing on is CGI, and it does look fake. It seems like we can't get a movie that doesn't have at least one or two instances of this anymore. Like with Ghost in the Shell, when she was jumping around, it looks super fake. In this, we have a lot of that kind of stuff too. It's not terrible, it doesn't distract, it's not as bad as like X-Men Apocalypse or anything, but there are instances where the CGI is a little bit overused, and I think it stands out, and it does take a little bit out of the movie. Okay, so final thoughts. Final thoughts on the movie. Did I like it? Did I not like it? Is it actually worth seeing? That kind of thing. It's hard on movies like this because they're not trying to be something that's special or something that's even especially good. They're trying to be what they're trying to be. And so in that regard, the movie is successful. It delivers tons of over-the-top action, somewhat based around cars, with this cast of characters that we're somewhat familiar with, in some cases very familiar with. So yes, they do that. It is a huge over-the-top movie that's very well done overall. In terms of being a good Fast and Furious movie, I gotta say, I personally don't think so. I like the ones that had more of the focus on the cars and the characters rather than the action and explosions. I'm all for action, but you need to have the right balance. You can't have just nonsensical action constantly. And while this did have some threads going throughout that made it a little bit more down to earth, I don't think that those could stand up against the crazy action. It was just too overpowering. So it doesn't kill the movie by any means, but it's definitely going to knock it down a little bit. I think I saw on Rotten Tomatoes, I think it was like 60-something for critics and like 80-something for fans. I'm going to fall right in the middle of those two at around 70-something. If I was going to give it a number, which I don't do. It's good for what it is. It's not as good as it could be, I think, and it definitely could be a lot better, but it does deliver. It is successful at what it's trying to be. If you're okay with that going into it, which you probably would be if you're going to see this movie, then you're probably going to like it at least well enough. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you guys think. How do you feel about this franchise? Did you like it better in the beginning like I did, or I do, or do you like it better now, or how do you feel about it in general? Let me know. 8 movies in, that's a lot of movies for a franchise, so it's surprising to me that they're still doing this well. So let me know what you think about it. I'm curious, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day, so turn on notifications. Click that little bell in that little spot somewhere. It's over here, I think. And give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. That's over there. And make sure you leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.